Welcome back, everyone. Grab a seat and let's get focused, because today's explainer is just absolutely fascinating. We're unpacking a brilliant piece of source material today. It's this mythic, almost graphic novel-style fable called The Architect of Stasis and the Logic of the Crucible. Now, speaking as an existentialist myself, I absolutely love this text. It frames what is basically the ultimate philosophical battle of human history. On one side, we have this desperate, deep-seated human urge for perfect, unchanging order. And on the other, the chaotic, totally unavoidable reality of freedom. So let's just dive right into this. We're going to treat this text like a sort of, well, a case study in human nature, really, examining this massive clash between a supposedly perfect kingdom and an agent of absolute disruption.
So here's the big existential question that basically sits at the very heart of our explainer today. What happens when a perfect world is exposed as a perfect lie? You know, as human beings, we have this profound tendency, don't we? We want to organize everything into neat, predictable little boxes. We desperately want the universe to be a math equation that we can just solve, figure out, and then stop thinking about. But spoiler alert, the universe doesn't actually work that way. And when you try to force dynamic, living human beings into a totally static, unchanging system, you're not creating a utopia. You are literally building a pressure cooker. So let's take a look at exactly how this kingdom is put together.
Section 1. The Architecture of Stasis.
Right, so in philosophical terms, the kingdom in our text operates on what we call a completely essentialist worldview. Essentialism is just the idea that essence precedes existence. That meaning purpose, right and wrong, all of that is predetermined, fixed, and handed down from on high by the rulers. There's no individual discovery, no personal meaning-making allowed. The state decides what is good and you just obey. It's an architecture of absolute stillness. The High Minister of this kingdom articulates their trap perfectly. He says the moral binary of dark and light is carved in stone, a gilded cage of grace. He's basically boasting that they've pruned away the bitter fruit of the world and burned the twisted roots of ancient fear. They've created a world of absolute black and white, a strict moral binary. But I mean, look at the words they actually use to describe the result. A gilded cage. Sure, it might be covered in gold, it might even be called grace, but a cage is still a cage, right? This is such a brilliant illustration of how authoritarian systems try to sell you your own imprisonment as if it's some sort of luxury upgrade. And how do they actually keep the citizens inside this cage? Well, they do it by feeding what the text calls the pious cow of contentment. It's a great phrase. The minister says, to strive is sin if striving lacks a goal. We offer rest, the ultimate repose for the soul. So they hide the terrifying, dizzying void of existence behind endless ceremonies. They pacify the whole population by just removing the very human need to strive, to struggle, and to grow. That pious cow of contentment is exactly that, a state of passive, unthinking, grazing satisfaction. The logic is simple. If you never ask hard questions, you never feel existential dread. You just chew the cud of the status quo.
Section 2. The Sovereign's Perfect Illusion.
Now, to really understand a rigid system, you have to look into the minds of the architects who built it. In our source text, that means looking at the royal philosopher and the king himself. These are men who genuinely, mistakenly believe they have mathematically conquered the chaos of living. The royal philosopher views the natural world with absolute disgust. He actually calls it a tasteless broth of motion, base, and blind. He hates unpredictability. So he praises this figure he calls the last thinker, who supposedly conquered this terror using what the text brilliantly terms Apollonian gaskets of the mind. Now, think about engineering for a second. A gasket is a seal that prevents leakage, right? Well, here, Apollonian gaskets are intellectual mechanisms. They're designed to seal away the terrifying, messy, cosmic secrets of the universe, enforcing total static control. The philosopher wants the universe to be measured, named, and still. He literally wants to outlaw chaos.
And this brings us right to the ultimate hubris of the king. He proclaims that his word is the master architecture, the final seal. He truly believes he's taken the stained blueprints of human history, along with the dull lead of the unrefined world, and transmuted all of it into permanent, unchanging gold. He actually calls himself the arbiter of stasis. Think about how cut off from reality you have to be to do that. He interprets the terrified, suppressed silence of his kingdom as this amazing achievement to be proud of. He thinks he's actually won the game of existence.
Section 3. Enter the Uncanny Juster.
But, as any existentialist professor will tell you for sure, the universe absolutely does not tolerate stasis for very long. This is the big narrative turning point of our text. This is where the illusion of perfect order gets violently challenged.
Just picture the scene with me for a second. The king is sitting there on his throne, just basking in his perfect, silent, static control. And then, there's a sensory disruption. The source text describes it perfectly. A sound like a jagged blade slicing through silk echoes from the shadows. Wow. That sound is the sudden intrusion of reality into a totally sterile environment. It is jarring, it is sudden, and it completely, utterly ruins the king's master architecture. So let's take a closer look at the jester himself. He steps right out of the shadows, and he has this porcelain mask literally fused to his skin. But honestly, the most important detail here is his weapon. He doesn't carry a sword. He doesn't have a spear. He wields a single mirror shard arrow. This is absolutely crucial. The jester is not there to physically assassinate the king. No, he is there to philosophically assassinate him. A mirror shard arrow is a weapon of self-reflection. It's meant to pierce right through the king's subjective reality and force him to look dead on at his own hollow truth.
Section 4. The philosophy of becoming. This right here is where the debate truly begins. The jester arrives to just entirely dismantle the king's illusion, and he is armed with a radically different worldview. The jester openly mocks the king. He tells him he is standing on the very edge of the spire, but he's totally blind to reality. He says, "You stand upon the spire's edge, yet you blink, unwilling to see the spirit of becoming in your pain." Okay, this is pure existentialism right here. The spirit of becoming is the fundamental idea that existence precedes essence. We are not static statues carved in stone. We are verbs. We are constantly changing, failing, learning, and evolving. To deny that, to try and freeze yourself into a state of permanent being, is to suffer unnecessarily. See, the king thinks pain is a glitch in his system, but the jester? The jester knows pain is just the natural friction of becoming. The contrast between these two philosophies is just incredibly stark. On one hand, we have Stasis. The jester calls the king's absolute laws disappearing ink. He points out that the king's gilded cages are as fragile as paper in the rain. I mean, sure, they look strong, but they just dissolve the second they make contact with reality. And then, against all that, we have becoming. The jester brings the logic of the crucible. Now, a crucible is a vessel used to melt down metals at crazy high temperatures to burn away impurities, right? Well, the jester's truth is the honest currency of shattered expectations. He is the dynamic, unpredictable, living ink that constantly rewrites reality, completely exposing the king's static trust as nothing but a fragile illusion.
Section 5. Modern Gilded Cages.
All right, let's pull back the curtain a bit. Why does all of this actually matter to you and me? Because, believe it or not, this text isn't just about mythical kings and castles. It is a razor-sharp critique of the rigid corporate structures and social systems that we all navigate every single day. Let's map this out directly. That master architecture of the king, that's rigid corporate policy. It's those sprawling HR manuals and that totally toxic, well, we've always done it this way mentality. The gilded cage, those are the golden handcuffs of a comfortable but ultimately meaningless job. They are the comfort zones we willingly trap ourselves in. And the sovereign? That is the out-of-touch executive in the corner office. You know the one, obsessed with static control and micromanagement, completely disconnected from the messy reality of the factory floor or the shifting market. Modern bureaucracies act as their very own arbiters of stasis.
So what's the takeaway? How do we actually apply the jester's message? Well, think of the jester as essentially the ultimate disruptive consultant. When a system becomes too rigid, it becomes fragile. So applying the logic of the crucible means intentionally disrupting that bureaucratic static control. It means fully embracing the spirit of becoming in our own lives and our careers. We have to acknowledge that we must constantly adapt rather than just resting on our laurels. It literally means shattering the moral binary of corporate speak and demanding the honest currency of actual dynamic truth. And honestly, this brings us right to you. Are you living in a gilded cage? Are you sitting back, happily feeding your own pious cow of contentment? Have you traded the terrifying, amazing thrill of striving and growing for a false sense of absolute security? Because the text warns us, it warns us loud and clear, that those cages are just paper in the rain. When the storm of real life hits, they are not going to protect you. Which naturally leads us to the next big question. Who holds the mirror shard arrow in your life? Think about it. What is the disruptive truth, the sudden event, or maybe the challenging person that is currently slicing through the silk of your illusions? When that arrow forces you to look at your reflection, what do you see? Do you see a dynamic, evolving human being, or do you see someone desperately clinging to a hollow truth? We'll leave you today with the uncanny jester's final, incredibly provocative thought. He stares down the king and he says, "I have a wager for you, sovereign of the small. Let us see which of your Apollonian gaskets is the first to fall." It's not a question of if the static system will collapse, folks, but which part of the illusion shatters first. The logic of the crucible always wins in the end. The real question is, will you try to maintain your fading, disappearing ink, or will you bravely embrace the spirit of becoming? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those hard questions, and I'll see you next time.